Okay, planning board, we are live, we are recording, phone lines are open, you are good to go.
Thank you very much. Thank you, LTV, again, for bringing us to the world. Good evening and welcome to the planning board of the town of East Hampton, May 11th, 2022. We have a number of matters on site plan review and a couple of resolutions and order review. No public hearings are on for tonight. Member Randy Parsons will not be with us this evening, but we are pleased to have back with us live via television, Ed Krug. Hello, Ed.
Hello.
Hello.
Happy to be back.
Yep, thank you. We're glad to have you back. Soon enough, here in the room. So the first matter we have on for is a sub-waiver review for Nzetti. That is, Will Highland is going to take care of that for the planning department. Ian is on it for the planning board, and it's the applicant. The applicant, oh, it's the way I'm okay, very well. Okay, so let's get started.
Okay, so this is an application to subdivide an existing 1.23 acre lot into two new individual ones. The property is located on Cottages Lane in Montauk. It's split evenly between Zone A residents and Zone B residents. The property was part of the Seascape Garden subdivision in 1965, originally subdivided as the two lots 4 and 5. The property was rezoned to its current designation in September 1972. The proposed lots are both 100% cleared of naturally occurring vegetation, and the neighboring lots are all residential property. The proposed sub-waiver will result in the creation of the substandard Lot 1 due to Lot 1 being zoned A residence, and thusly requiring a minimum square footage of 40,000 square feet, with the proposed Lot 1 only being 28,163 square feet. Will require an area variance for the zoning board of appeals, which the applicant has already submitted an application for. An additional variance will also be required for the Lot 1 solar panels' proximity to the proposed lot line, which is in violation of the side yard setback requirements at only 1.5 feet. The project is an unlisted action pursuant to SECRA and Chapter 128 of the Town Code. It is recommended that the planning board request lead agency status for the project. The planning board should also ultimately send comments to the zoning board of appeals as they are an involved agency. The proposed sub-waiver will create a substandard lot without a principal accessory structure, which is usually prohibited under the town code. However, Chapter 255 of the town code states that there are exceptions that may be made, including that no accessory building, when a property owner owns two or more contiguous conforming residential lots in common ownership, at least one of which is improved with a single-family dwelling, an accessory building or structure may be constructed on the vacant contiguous lot, provided that the applicant demonstrates the existence of sufficient buildable area to construct the principal structure on the lot upon which the accessory structure is to be constructed. The applicant were ever to wish to sell one of the lots, a primary structure would need to be constructed on the proposed Lot 1. Additionally, the shared access easement for the lots would need to be addressed in that eventuality. The board should discuss whether the applicant should take any further steps to ensure the future compliance of the lots. It should also be determined with the applicant which home will use the existing solar panels and whether they will eventually be removed. Directly north of the proposed lot is a parcel designated as an Indian burial ground. The property is not located on the National List of Historic Landmarks or the State or National Register of Historic Landmarks or the eligible list. The planning department does not generally require a phase 1A archaeological survey be conducted for such a small disturbed area. However, the plot is situated in an area that the New York State Offices of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation has identified as archaeologically sensitive. Additionally, there is an Indian burial ground, as mentioned before, directly north. New York State's Cultural Resource Information System indicates that there was an architectural survey of this area conducted in the past. The planning department will try to locate the survey. The department recommends that the board consider asking for a phase 1A archaeological survey to be done on the property. Per the Seascape Gardens approval dated December 18th, 1963, Cottages Lane was required to have a 4-foot shoulder and 24-foot paved surface, which to date has not occurred. The board should just consider what road improvements may be required. 4 lots are currently taking access from Cottages Lane, and the proposed sub-waiver without a fifth, which would trigger a requirement for the road to to fully have a street design as outlined in the 1963 approval, rather than the current dirt common driveway. The board should discuss the planned cost for this requirement, and the fire marshal and consultant engineer should be consulted regarding future plans for the road. So in conclusion, the application is incomplete pending the resolution of the aforementioned issues and the submission of the fire items.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and Ed is out there, yes, cyberspace. So I'm the attorney representing Nora Franzetti, who's the owner of the property. Nora is here with her daughter and her 2 grandchildren. The background to this is basically the affordability crisis in Montauk. So Nora is the owner of 4 Oaks. Her daughter works at the Dock Restaurant. Her daughter's husband works for the Viking Fleet. The 2 families, the 2 households, are sharing the single house on this lot. So at one point in the past, these were 2 lots when Nora did own them. And back in the 1990s, I think they merged them by deed. I was not involved in that, but at one time they had 2 lots. They merged them into one ownership. And so today, if we want to create a separate lot, which we do for Nora's daughter and son-in-law, we have to redivide the property. And to do that, we need a variance because although the southeasterly lot with the house is on is in the B residence zone, the northwesterly lot is in the A zone. We don't think the magnitude of the variance is all that great. We're proposing to create a lot of over 28,000 square feet in an A zone where 40,000 square feet is the minimum. So it's in our view, not a particularly large variance. Most of the neighboring lots, I should say, are that size, if not smaller. The lots that are on the west side of the property along East Lake Drive, those are roughly in the half-acre range, so a little bit smaller than the proposed lot. And those around it on the north, northwest, northeast side, and also on Pocos Arena are also in the 0.6 to 0.70 acre range. So by and large, the lot is consistent with those that are already in the area. That's not really your purview. Obviously, that's for the Zoning Board of Appeals. But that's the backdrop to this. The backdrop, as you probably know, is to find a house in Montauk that is under $1 million in cost now is becoming very difficult. There probably are some out there, but not much. And that's under $1 million. That's not like under 500,000 or 300,000 or something that ordinary working people can readily afford. So the only way that the Franzettis are going to remain, and I should mention, Nora's got another daughter, but she does not live in the area. So this is, for the daughter that is here today and potentially for her grandchildren. They want to keep the property in their family for as long as they can. So the little practical way to do that is to do what we're proposing, which is to subdivide. There are 2, Will has done a very good job in the memo. He hasn't raised too many issues here, I don't think, but I'll address a couple of them. One, which I have to say gets under my skin, and I wish the planning department would stop doing this. The code prohibits the construction of accessory buildings on a vacant lot. It does not prohibit the creation by subdivision of a lot with an accessory building without a principal building. The planning department's been doing this for 15 or 20 years, and I really would ask them to stop. Code does not prohibit this. So I think the whole thing under accessory structures should disregard. I don't think it applies. What does apply, and the most important thing I think here is we are adjacent to the Montauk Indian Cemetery. And in terms of our archaeological resources, we don't want to be accused or in the position of potentially interfering with burials if they're already in the area. So in terms of phase 1A is a literature search. I think we know we're beyond that. We already did such a search in 2018. There was kind of a false start on proceeding this, and then Nora for a moment backed away and then decided to go forward again. Back in 2018, we hired VHB, their principal archaeologist, which is the person we would like to use today. She doesn't work for them anymore, is Allison McGovern. And what VHB did in 2018, they came out and they used ground penetrating radar with some students from Stony Brook. And unfortunately, they didn't do a full GPR survey of the proposed lot. They came out for one day and they basically spent the better part of the day within the Indian Cemetery, calibrating the equipment and trying to find out what they needed to do to, because, there are obviously graves in the Indian Cemetery, which are known or believed to be known. We know that Stephen Torkhouse is buried there and some other people. So they had to make sure the equipment was working properly so that they could identify some of those. And some of the ones, like Stephen Torkhouse's grave, they got a good return on the radar, indicating there was, something was buried down there. Others, they did not. They got blank returns or very weak returns. And we're going to, by the way, we are going to submit this report to you. We did get a report from BHP. One of the things that kind of surprised me, even disturbed me a little bit, I suppose, is human burials. Long Island soils are very acidic. And after, a couple hundred years or so, even skeletal remains will disintegrate. I didn't really realize that, but I suppose that's why, even though people have been living here for thousands of years, you don't typically go out in the backyard and dig a hole and find a human being, remains of a person. So in any event, they did get to do 3 transects, I think it was, on the proposed vacant lot. They didn't find anything that was indicative of a human burial, but it wasn't a thorough review. What I'd like to say about this is simply this: we would like to work with you and with the planning department. As I said, we intend to hire what's her name, Allison McGovern, as the archaeologist, and we would ask that Allison and the department work and come back with your approval, come up with some sort of a plan to investigate the proposed lot and make sure that we don't find human burials. We don't obviously want to be in that position.
Could you put up the photo? I just want to think before we use that conversation. Sorry.
So, that's, we want to conduct a full archaeological survey and make sure that we're not doing any disturbance that would be, harmful to the, any burials. So in the upper, the rectangle at the top, that's the Indian burial ground. And, you can see we're on the side there. So, so that's the archaeological issue. We certainly want to work with the department and with the board, and I think we're well beyond doing stage 1A. A couple of other minor things of the solar array. The plan is that those will remain, and they would be used to provide power to both lots. Actually, if the house is built on the vacant lot, then both of them can tie into that. And finally, in terms of road improvements, I don't think this road serves not only the existing lots in the subdivision right now, but there are also some lots to the northeast. You'll see if the area were broadened out. There are other properties that are also coming off Pocahontas Lane or Torkhouse Lane. So we're well beyond 4. I don't think your jurisdiction changes here because we're creating an additional lot in terms of compliance with the 1963 subdivision. You have inherent jurisdiction under Town Law 280A. 280A says that no building permit shall not be issued on a vacant lot, residential purposes, unless the road is suitably approved. So, I think you have some discretion here in terms of road improvements. We certainly would not expect that if we got a lot approved that we would have to bear the cost of, building this entire road out to a 24-foot wide paved surface, even assuming that 24-foot wide was the desirable end result. So, we understand that the board might have some recommendations for improvements, but we don't expect to have to bear the burden of paving the entire road. In addition to which, I don't think the neighborhood really wants a fully paved road. So that's beside the point. So that's really what I have. We would like to, I think the next step before you go to the zoning board, we have to deal with the archaeological issue, and we would like to, as I said, work with the planning department to come up with a protocol, that you approve. Go do that, and if it shows that the property, or at least an area on the property that might be actually improved, is clear of any human remains, then hopefully we're clear to proceed with the application.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm confused. Maybe you can clarify this accessory structure issue. So you have one lot right now that you want to split into 2. There's a house, so the resulting 2 lots will be, one lot will have a house on it, which is there now, and the other lot will be vacant, upon which you will want to build a new home. So where does an accessory structure come in?
There's a barn on that right here.
Is that what that light structure
Yeah,
is?
there's a barn paddock,
saying it's over 6%.
Yeah.
So how did that,
Well, the code, for reasons known, I guess, only to the drafters, the zoning code since 1984 has always said, if you have a vacant lot, the town doesn't, an existing vacant lot, the town doesn't want that vacant lot, would prefer that vacant lot not to be built on prematurely. So it says you can't build an accessory building structure on a lot that doesn't contain a principal residence. Now, in the early 2000s, they built an exception to that because people did want to do it and the town reneged. And so there's some exceptions now. You can do it if you own the adjacent property and you agree, whatever, at a certain period of time to build a house. But it says you cannot construct without these other precautions. You can't build an accessory structure on a vacant lot. It does not say anywhere in the code that you can't subdivide land in which one or more lots already contains an accessory building. And there have been many subdivisions in East Hampton history in which the nature of the property is such that there are already accessory buildings on the property. And when you subdivide, one or more of them winds up on a vacant lot. That's why this keeps coming back up again. And the planning department keeps misreading the code provision that says you can't construct to say you can't subdivide to create a vacant lot. There's no policy reason behind designing the subdivision around, whether or not there's an accessory building on the vacant lot.
so you're saying that whether or not those two subdivided lots are owned by the same owner, it doesn't matter if there's an accessory structure on one of the lots?
Yeah, well, remember, our
The
intent,
planning department is saying that as long as the two lots are contiguous and owned by the same owner, then you can have an accessory.
right, it makes no material difference in this case because the family does not intend to sell to
But
a
in
third.
case there were two different owners, you're saying that it would still be okay to have that.
Absolutely.
So it's more of an academic.
It's an academic issue, but it keeps coming up, and that's not what the code says. That's all. That's why I get under my skin.
So you're,
It's a very minor point
you're on, that's your point
of the day.
of, yes, of improved.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else? Let's go to the board. Ian?
Yeah, well, thanks for the academic lesson there. It's interesting. I've never read that section of code that carefully and points. I don't think that's the most important point here. I'm very sympathetic to what brings this application before our board and to the problem in general. Unfortunately, I think that, we normally don't give or don't recommend lot area variances of this size. I mean, I know the applicant's agent said it was small. I don't think this would be considered small. Generally speaking, it's what, 25% increase or more than that. So it's not tiny. I'm sympathetic to the fact that there were once two lots here and they were later merged. Frankly, I'd love to be able to look at the subdivision and just talk about the design. But I really think that your argument is before the zoning board. If you get the variance, we're in business. I think another angle would be to try to get your points about neighboring lot sizes is not a bad one. The issue is, as you know, we have to be fair and consistent across the board. And if you look at the history of upzoning throughout the town of East Hampton, there's going to be a lot of similar type cases. And again, the affordability issue is a real one. And I think we have to be consistent and fair across the board. So if we were to recommend this and move forward in this case, I think there would be others to come before us. And frankly, maybe that's good planning as a town. But I think what effectively we're being asked to do at that point is look at it as if it were zoned differently because we think it ought to be. So I think you could look at a zoning change. I think you could certainly proceed with the variance. I think the third option is to build an affordable accessory structure, affordable accessory apartment, which I know there's some limitations on there that might not fit the needs of the two families who would be using them, but perhaps a variance on the affordable accessory apartment would be easier for someone. I don't know. I think in either case, you'd be asking for a variance, and that's for the ZBA. I think right now you could apply for that before us, and I would be incredibly sympathetic. So, it happens that sometimes what I personally feel, and as a person, and even my personal views of the town are different, I think, than what we're instructed to do. And I think that, on the face of it, if we didn't have that narrative again, which is be a little tear jerking and something I'm incredibly sympathetic for. On the face of it, I think this is something that typically the planning department would say, no chance. And I think that you know that. So look, I'm not inclined to offer comments to the ZBA that are super negative because, again, sometimes things happen where I wish I would look for a way to say yes for this type of thing. But I do have to be, I think, consistent throughout for what I think we're directed to do and how we would normally treat such a thing. The other details, I think that that's your issue. The archaeology, it sounds like you are willing to do the right thing there, the road improvements. If that's an issue, I would defer to council in terms of where we are now and whether creating this, a new lot here would do anything about going back in time. And I'm certainly again sympathetic to the fact that this one applicant wouldn't want to go do all that work that should have already been done. But I think all of those issues are secondary to, to the lesson we learned today about accessory structures. Actually, I'm not an attorney, but I think that the reading might be correct, even though it doesn't make much sense if it were. Again, I would be sympathetic, and in this case, if the same owner owns it anyway, I don't think there's a real issue that comes up. So I'll be interested to hear what other members say. Happy to talk more details that come up, but I think that essentially what you're probably looking for tonight is a recommendation that the variance is granted. From a planning standpoint, I'm certainly not comfortable giving an affirmative recommendation there. However, should you get that variance, I'd be happy to proceed and design a subdivision. I think it makes sense with what has been allowed by code.
Yeah, I think you put it correctly. I feel really sympathetic. I lived in Montauk for a while, and there's nothing there for anybody who can try to make a living here. But I kind of agree with Ian. I think there's been a lot of upzoning in this town, and I've seen applications come in front of the zoning board that were denied in the same situation. They wanted a family to be next door, and those were denied. I don't remember the details. I think Rick made some good points with this, size lots, and that is going into the neighborhood. What confuses me is that this one lot has two zoning areas. And that could be an argument, I guess, one lot having two zoning recommendations could be your argument to the zoning board. And I think Ian said it all. And, if the zoning board gives you that variance, I think, we'll talk and we'll get it subdivided.
Yeah, I disagree with Ian and Sharon. I may be on shaky legal ground, I'm not sure. But I think there is a difference, and I think it does come under the umbrella of good planning as to what is going to be done with this property. The circumstances of this application, I think, should be considered and is part of the consideration that I need to make as a board member. And again, using that umbrella parameter of good planning, I think in this case, especially with the point that Sharon made about two lots being right next to each other, and one is A zone and one is B zone, I would be in favor of allowing or suggesting that the zoning board grant the variance. That's what variances are for. Sometimes variances are sought under pretexts that are just ridiculous, that they're more profit-oriented. Developers request them. I think in those cases, there's a good reason why to deny them. In this case, it's the exact opposite. I think this is very good reason why we should approve it. The zoning board should approve it. There's a big problem in Montauk. I think that's something that we can't just brush aside. And I think this would address that problem, and at least in this one case. So I'm all for granting the variance.
it's very difficult. I agree with Ian, and I am very sympathetic. I have 3 kids in a small house. I'm looking to build an accessory apartment, and I know you can build a garage and an apartment over the garage. And I know it's 600 square feet is the maximum, but maybe you can ask for 800 square feet and try again. I don't know. None of this is well with me, but I defer to you.
Ed?
Yeah, I have to say that I'm in Lou's camp on this one. You know, obviously we're all very sympathetic. We to the issues around housing affordability in the town. But I would say this is, I mean, town's looking at different ways of trying to address the issue, and frankly, the granting of variances could be one of them. I do think, you know, clearly the Franzettis may not be the last people who ever own these properties, right? So we'll have 2 potentially substandard, or at least 1 substandard lot into perpetuity here. So we do have to consider that. And yes, of course, we have to be fair. We have to be consistent. But I do think in this case, you know, we really are tackling a really important problem in town. And I think given the fact that this was 2 lots before, one of them is already a B residence. There are many other smaller lots in this neighborhood. I really do think that this is something that I would recommend that we support. But let's see what the zoning board has to say.
And this is a terrible, thank you. This was one of those ones where you really have to go back and forth and balance what the equities are. And, you know, I agree that it's not a small variance. It's 28,000 square feet versus 40,000 square feet. That's a substantial amount. And that really speaks against this. And I would hate this to be something that people look to in the future and say, well, you gave them a 25% variance. But the thing that I'm seeing here is that it's the unique parcel in that it's got 2 different zones in it. And having 2 different zones in it, I think, gives a reason for us to, if not outright approve the variance, to at least not object to it and to put it into the hands of the ZBA and let them make their decision. All around it are the south of it are all smaller lots. So in terms of the character of the community, I don't see this as being destructive to the character of the community. And again, you know, we're talking about however it occurred, that it was once 2 separate lots and then became 1 lot. The fact is that you've got really almost, I don't quite call it a flip of a coin as to which way the zoning, which lot it should be, but it would almost be arbitrary to say you can have it as a B but not as an A. I don't want to go so far as to say that, but I could see an argument being made. That having been said, I think that all the other issues, most particularly to me, the archaeological issue, I think that's an outstanding and important issue that we have to deal with. The applicant seems to be very willing to do that, and I'm glad, because I wouldn't want that. I wouldn't want this to get derailed on that. I do tend to agree about the road improvements also. Sometimes maintaining the bucolic, if you will, character of a dirt road is desirable, and this may be one of them. Leave that for a later date. But in terms of how do I see on the threshold issue of, do we support it? I would be in favor. So that leaves us with 3-3.
Can I,
I'm in favor of that. the idea of the fact that it has those two zonings, I think it's a really good argument for them. So,
Could I ask a question about that though? Why not
Ask for a zone change, because that's really, that's what we're all saying.
That really is the overarching, why us is probably there's another guy who deals with that.
I mean, I guess that is an option. Normally, I figure zone changes are hard. Just a bit of historical background, and I should point out, planning department memo it says that the westerly lot was actually lot 5 in the original subdivision map that created Torque House Lane. That's actually not correct. There were 4 lots. So what happened is the original town zoning, as you probably know, town created zoning in 1957. The original zoning map, there was such a struggle to get the zoning that in the early days, town zoning was very, very, very relaxed. By the 1970s, so pretty much everything east of East Lake Drive, if it wasn't zone commercial, it was zone B residence. By the 1970s, the town was beginning to realize, we need to reduce density somewhat. So anything that wasn't already subdivided east of East Lake Drive was rezoned in the early 70s, 1972, from B residence to A residence. So the upzoning goes back to then. The westerly lot was already existing, but it was described property. It wasn't part of the subdivision. And what they did is they exempted filed subdivision maps. So that's why the northwesterly lot got zoned A residence, whereas the lot next to it is still in the B zone. And that is carried forward to the present day. As I said, at one point in time, the Franzetti family owned both lots in separate ownership, and they merged them for whatever reason in the 1990s by deed. So that's the background.
So I guess that leaves us with the planning department. Well, some sort of a letter to the ZBA.
We're not, just Mr. Chairman, we have to come back to you.
Yeah, no, I
see us
see.
again from the archaeology, so you might be a little premature.
Actually, thank you. That would be a useful way to handle this at this moment in time.
You have a pending application to CGA right now, right?
Yes, but we're not, archaeology has to be done before we would expect that here.
Right. But after, how far down the process with planning would you, seems like you want to get that ZBA answer.
We have to, once yours, I would say that you would approve protocol. We would conduct the archaeological survey, see what we come back with. Hopefully we come back and the property's clean. Because if it's not, then it's.
Well, then you have a whole different set of issues to deal with. And again, as I said before, to me, that really is, if not the paramount issue, a paramount issue. Because,
Is that Stephen Talkhouse grave right on the property line there?
Not on the property line.
That's just a monument that?
Yes.
He's buried there. Stephen Talkhouse is buried there.
Right.
And
Where's
in the
monument
cemetery.
there?
No, not where the no, he's in the center of, there's a monument, there's a bicentennial marker at the forward edge of the cemetery. And when you go into the cemetery, there's a marble stone to Stephen Talkhouse. And if you want to know how he got to be buried there, you can read about it. There was an article in the New York Sun in 1879. The author was at the funeral, which was at St. Matthew's Chapel on Fremont Harbor Road, which some of you may know is now, anyone know where that is today?
Title deed, isn't it?
What was that?
So what's at the corner of Gerard Drive?
No, it's,
No,
Ed has the answer.
it's Paddle Diva, isn't it?
it's where?
Where Paddle Diva is now.
No, it's a recreational building on the East Hampton Marina, East Hampton Point. It was moved to East Hampton Point. It's a recreational building in East Hampton Point. There was an article in the Star in the last few months about the possibility of it, being moved someplace else and preserved. So anyway, he was buried from that chapel. The author of the article rode with the family all the way out to Montauk. We're talking horse and wagon in those days, and then was present at the burial. There's a lot of information about the whole burial, everything about it. Very
What's at
interesting.
the entrance of Gerard Drive? Says the Stephen Talkhouse, there's like a little marker there.
That's where he's believed to have been born. That triangle is called Molly's Hill. His mother was Molly, and I won't divert now, but I think I might know where he died.
Well, I know.
The actual location.
I run by his house, his old house in Hither Hills.
That's right. There you go. He lived there for a while.
So we will see you down the road. And if you,
There are some fun points. So,
just identify yourself, Nora.
I'm sorry, I'm Nora Franzetti, the owner. So when my husband and I bought that property, there were 2 lots, and we put one in my name and both of those. I always wanted a horse. And so I decided I'm never going to do anything with this property other than live here with my horses. So that's why they were put together. And those accessory buildings are the barns that came in on a truck, like they weren't physically built there. So they can be easily moved. And now, fast forward, I have a daughter who has 2 children. I grew up in Montauk. She was born in Southampton Hospital, so was my other daughter. These 2 were born there also. And it's like, we just want to have a place for them to live. That's it in a nutshell. And I appreciate everything you've said, and I understand everything you said, but it's really just that, like, we have no intention of selling it down the road. We're not looking to, you know what I mean? If I wanted to do that, I would have left them separate and had that sitting there that whole time, but that's not what it's about, so.
The narrative, I think, is a very persuasive document.
And before I did start, because I do live next to the Indian burial ground, I was very concerned that there might be something. So I hired that company to come in, and it was a schooling thing at the same time. And they did spend, I'd say, more than 3/4 of the day in the graveyard doing their thing. And then they came over and basically ran out of time. But I wanted to know. And then I got cold feet about separating it, and that's why I just stopped it at that point. But I definitely wanted to know, and Rick gave me the name to deal with. So I thank you very much.
Thank you. So is there anything else we need to do with this application tonight? Okay, so liaison. Well, I'll thank you.
Okay.
2, 3, do we need?
Yeah, well spotted. Yeah, it should have been in the question.
Very well, thank you. Is there a motion on that?
Well, this is one where my dear friend Pat Schutte back in the day would have argued for the zoning board taking the agency, and just not the right thing.
I don't think so.
Since that's the.
I get it, this argument.
They're gonna do one thing, they're gonna do a lot more, I think.
I would agree. I would agree. We would recommend that the board be lead agency in basically almost any subdivision and minor subdivision.
Well,
I kind of just don't want to go down that long road because I've done it about 9,000 times with different boards. But in the end, it'll work out better because, you know, there is that one variance that is important. You know, you look at it as the thing that says whether or not this is going to go at all or not. But as far as the multitude of planning issues that are involved, it really is, it's planning board business.
Well, someone's got to ask a stupid question every now and again. So.
No, I didn't say that.
It's not a stupid question because
It's came up many a time, so it can't.
I know, yeah. Okay, well, I'm sorry.
on this application, the zoning issue is a threshold issue. If they can't get past that, you know, we're gonna be doing nothing. But, you know, but for a threat, as soon as we get.
Yes, and I figured that would be the answer, but I just
All right,
wanted to embarrass myself.
Would you like to
On that note, yeah, I have to move for lead agency.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor of the planning board being lead agency?
Aye.
That makes it 6-0. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you.
We'll be in touch, I guess, with the department. We want Allison to talk to the department.
I was in the board with Pat.
I hope I didn't reply this like a.
No, of course. No. You didn't at all. I'll be asking.
Sam, I got for Ed or Elijah.
A lot, yes. We're a non-sectarian group. All right, the next item we have up is Montauk Sunset Cottages. This Brian Frank is going to be with us today, and this Stan, you're on the overview. Welcome. And ordinarily this would have been Randy Parsons, but he has agreed to step into the breach. So go right ahead with the application.
Sorry. Good evening, board members. Brian Frank on behalf of the planning department. Welcome to the board member. I want to bring the aerial up on the screen just to kind of go over a little bit of background of what's on the property now and what the application involves. This is the Montauk Sunset Cottages property. It's made up of one lot consisting of 2 tax map properties. It is a waterfront lot. This is East Lake Drive. This is Lake Montauk, obviously. The property contains both tidal and freshwater wetlands. The tidal wetlands are located along the shoreline, but there are freshwater wetlands located really not so much on the property, but just to the north of the property line. There's a freshwater intermittent stream. There are several of these along East Lake Drive that drain a lot of that parkland, that county parkland to the east. A lot of that water flows beneath East Lake Drive and culverts and runs into the lake in various locations. So this area here, you can see some of it. This is a portion of the freshwater wetlands. All of this is on the survey. I just think there's a lot of information on the survey, and I think it's a little bit more distinct on the aerial. I do have all of the recent information that the applicant submitted last month here tonight. If the board members want anything in the way of the lighting plan, the landscape, even the old survey that had been previously submitted, please ask. I'm happy to bring that up. I'm also happy to bring that up for the applicants to further so that they can illustrate any points that they want to make. So the applicant, the property is in a residential zoning district and has a combination of uses on it right now. There is a residence, a single-family residence that's proposed to be demolished and rebuilt with a larger residence. Is it on both screens? Yeah. Okay. With a larger single-family residence, a swimming pool is proposed seaward of it. There are a series of cottages in the northern half of the property. They are all proposed to be demolished and rebuilt. Most of them are proposed to be rebuilt in place, but they do involve new foundation. They'll be demolished. They'll be removed. New foundations will be constructed. There are 3 units that are going to be relocated. 2 of these units that are closest to the northern property line are going to get moved further south, improving their wetland setback. And one of them is going to be attached, so to speak, or rebuilt in conjunction with a double cottage here, and would essentially be a triple unit. The planning board discussed that at their last meeting and was generally satisfied with that relocation of those cottages, improving the freshwater wetland setback to the north and a negligible, basically maintaining the setback of this cottage to the south, a negligible reduction of less than 3 feet in setback, which the board found acceptable, and the planning department doesn't have an objection to it. In addition to the redevelopment of the house, there are a number of accessory structures that are proposed in the southern portion of the property. Some amenities, a pavilion, a storage building, a sauna, and a lot of the discussions to date have focused on, pardon me, distinguishing the conforming residential uses from the legally pre-existing non-conforming resort units that the cottages represent. The applicant is entitled to maintain those cottages as a non-conforming use. They're arguably not entitled to expand that use. That would be an expansion of a non-conforming use in the residential zone. So a fair amount of the discussions to date have been distinguishing who's going to occupy, or how is the new principal residence going to be used. It's going to be substantially larger than the residence that's there now. It'll be about 6,700 square feet with a full basement, a swimming pool seaward of it, and again, some amenities here. And I could bring that up on the survey if you'd like, but I'm sure you've had that information and you've had an opportunity to review it. The application was discussed most recently back in December by the board, and at that time, the planning board asked for a little bit more information about both how the property was going to be used and how the construction was going to proceed. So the board requested a narrative from the applicant articulating how the uses were going to be differentiated from each other, including those accessory uses. There were some discussions about, what if somebody from the cottage wants to use the sauna or the swimming pool, and those were areas, for example, that the applicant was asked to address in a little bit more detail. The planning department recommended obtaining a construction protocol because there are a significant number of structures that are going to be rebuilt. It is an environmentally sensitive lot, and if all that work is undergoing at the same time, that's a bit of a two-edged sword. On one side, it gets the work done more quickly, and the less time that this a sensitive property is an active construction site, the better. But it also makes for a lot of moving parts, and that would be the case here. The applicant was asked to provide a timeline, and they did an estimate of about 2 years to complete everything, which is ambitious based on observations of smaller projects on East Lake Drive. It's one of the farthest areas to get to remote-wise, and large and single-family residents are often not constructed in a 2-year time frame, and that's something that maybe the applicant may want to consider addressing in a little bit more detail. So with regard to, I don't know if I should stop here. Is there, should I see if anybody has any questions? Okay.
Yeah, give a full presentation and then.
The applicant did submit a revised lighting plan that addressed some of the outstanding items. There are some, the parking is proposed along West Lake Drive. And in the last application, it was proposed to have basically a U-shaped driveway, which addressed emergency vehicle access, which was an outstanding issue prior to that to date. But since all the parking is up front here and the cottages are kind of, scattered like Monopoly pieces, it kind of tossed them out
I
there.
would like to see the survey.
Okay.
Well, bring it up.
Yeah, just can't remember exactly where the parking was, and
I'm so spoiled with screens that this is.
You might have to stop sharing and then go to it.
I will not stop sharing.
Defiant.
I don't work well. No, I think I got this. I don't want to make it too small on your screen, so
You got to stop the share first, though, on Zoom. I think you're.
Really? Why?
Our new setup is very fun. Yeah.
Really? Okay. All right.
Yeah, there you go.
I surrender.
And then I think you got to minimize Zoom, right?
I can't just go back to sharing?
Share again, yeah. Oh, there you go.
Never want to see the sausage being made.
So this is the southern part of the property. This is the new residence that's proposed. This is the swimming pool. These are the new accessory structures. This is, it's not necessarily one way, I don't believe, but for the sake of discussion, we can call this the ingress into the property, kind of a pass through and an egress. There's parking both in the southern portion of the property and around the cottages. The bulk of it is in, I would say the northern portion of the property adjacent to East Lake Drive. And these are the cottages that are going to be reconstructed. There are 2 sanitary systems proposed, but really most of the improvements are going to be hooked up to sanitary system 1, which is an IA system or a low nitrogen system, however you want to describe it, complying with health department regulations for new sanitary systems. And most of the improvements in the property are going to be connected to sanitary system 1. The second system is really, I believe, just for the what's described on the plan as the pavilion in the southern portion of the property. So I do think there is a benefit to both the board and the applicant to getting more details about the sequencing of when the structures are going to be built and when they're going to be when the sanitary system is going to be installed, and when the residence is going to be built, and when everything is going to be tied together in a little bit greater detail than has been provided to date. The lighting has included path and bollard lightings, which would make sense if the parking is up at the street here. You would need some safe lighting for the people that have cottages farther from the parking lot. And I think that has been satisfactorily addressed in the most recent submission. The landscaping plan is still the same as the one that we looked at last time, where the planning department recommended more woody vegetation, and the planning board agreed with that. So that's still something that can be improved. The driveway material does need to be revised. This is in the Harbor Protection Overlay District, which has some strict regulations on paving materials. Pervious driveways to be a pervious driveway in Harbor Protection Overlay, it has to consist of either crushed gravel, usually quartz gravel, or crushed shells. Quartz gravel makes sense here for a gravel material. Recycled concrete aggregate is never really appropriate near wetlands anyway. It's not very water pervious. Concrete produces a lot of dust, and it really packs down and become impervious quickly over time. Not to mention that in general, recycled concrete comes from a lot of different sources. It's recycled from a lot of different materials, and there's very poor control over what might be in that concrete. And, that's one of the reasons that we try to keep it out of our more sensitive areas. Bluestone is also a restricted material in harbor protection. I'm not exactly sure why that is, but that is the case, and the driveway should be revised to comply with harbor protection, either through properly water pervious materials. It does allow for the paving certain asphalt, so if it were to be paved, it would have to be paved and incorporate appropriate drainage structures to allow that. So if I want to bring something else up, I have this. All right. I do want to point out the, I'm sorry if you'll indulge me for a minute. I do want to point out where the geothermal loop field is. The geothermal well field is to the west of the residence and a little bit west of the swimming pool. And the planning department supported relocating it farther away from the shoreline, and the planning board agreed with that. There is going to be a lot of earth moving on this application. There always is, even in small development projects. Here you have a significant amount of construction, and an updated grading plan is pertinent, and the planning department would encourage the board to obtain one. And anytime you can limit the amount of excavation going on in proximity to the shoreline, unless there's a compelling reason to do so, it should. So the geothermal well field should be relocated farther from the shoreline into more of the western portion of the property. I am going to mention the dilapidated structures along the shoreline. I don't know if I want to go back and bring up the photos, but there is an old bulkhead on the property that really doesn't function very much as a bulkhead. It was almost built as a makeshift pier prior to environmental regulations. And I don't think it's really, I don't think it makes much sense. The applicant is not obligated to do anything with it. It was built prior to zoning, or at least prior to modern environmental regulations. It's not an illegal structure, but it is a dilapidated structure. It is both a safety hazard and a bit of an aesthetic blight. And as it fails, it will continue to leak material into Lake Montauk. And it just doesn't make sense that you're going to have a bunch of brand new, modern, energy efficient structures on the property with a dilapidated, failing coastal structure. And I want to mention that because I really want to encourage the applicant to reconsider the possibility of removing it, which would be a significant improvement to the shoreline conditions on the property. I think that's everything I wanted to share with the board. I'm happy to answer any questions that I can, and
Thank you very much, Brian. Ms. Bistry, Ms. Carlotta?
Good evening, members of the board. Tiffany Scarlato, 45 Division Street, Sag Harbor, for the applicant. I also have Britton Bistry in here. I think there's just been a little bit of confusion as to dates on paperwork and stuff. Britton and I were just reviewing a couple of the things. The geothermal, just to touch on a couple of them really quickly, the geothermal has been eliminated and there's a new plan dated February 21st. So you should be looking at that plan. We've decided to go with a conventional system. The landscape plan, there's a new revision dated 12/27. We were last here on 12/15, and the plan you should be looking at is dated 12/27. Just with regard to the other issues, the construction protocol, we'll talk to the architect and see if we can come up with a more detailed plan for you. We are confirming that the tree-mounted lights, down lights, have been removed from the plan. Driveway will deal with this. We'll revise the surfaces to comply with HPOD, and along with that, we'll redo the grading details. Let's see, principal structure. We talked to, I don't know if Brian talked about it, but about the single family use and what you want with regard to that. I had understood the last time we were here that you were going to make it a condition of approval to submit a covenant, but if you want me to draft one and submit it now, that's up to council. Usually it's a condition of approval, but if you want to deal with that issue now, I'm happy to submit that. So just look for direction from the board on that. The shoreline structures, I think we've been over this a couple of different times. We're going to be back again at some point to talk about the shoreline structures, but all that proposed work has been removed from the project. So we're not proposing to remove any of those structures at this time or rebuild them.
The proposed work, meaning the removal of Vulcan, has been removed?
Well, it was proposed to be rebuilt,
okay,
reconstructed. So that's all of that. Anything to do with the waterfront structures has been removed from the project. So we're no longer talking about any of those structures along the waterfront.
Does that mean they're not going to be there? They're going to be gone?
No,
They're not doing anything.
we're not doing anything
Which
with
was
them right
where
now.
you were last time.
Exactly.
Okay, all right.
Exactly.
I thought I saw progress.
No, I think council advised you on what progress is permitted, and right now as I said, we'll be back to deal with those issues. We want to get the bulk of the project done now, and then we'll deal with the shoreline structures as necessary.
Look forward to that. Thank you very much.
Can you give us a hint?
We have a question.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Can you give us a hint as to what you're going to be doing when you come back to talk about those structures? I mean, it
No,
sounds.
we honestly don't know at this point. I mean, we did have conversations with them about taking it out, about leaving it in, and about reconstructing it. That was their ultimate goal. It wasn't to remove any of it, it was to reconstruct it. And we were just flat out told no. So at that point, we decided it was better to just remove from the
Was it a
application.
matter of engineering or told no?
That we wouldn't be able to reconstruct them. So
We said no.
We
Right.
don't know, I know.
exactly. So rather than not have them at all, the client chooses to keep them, retain them in their current condition as they are right now.
That's your answer? More or less? No? All right, Ian, thank you very much.
You get the answer you wanted.
No, they really an answer.
Well, obviously, we've talked about this application a number of times, and it's a pretty unique property, and a unique use or combination of uses. I think we're getting pretty close. I guess I would have to ask the planning department if the plans the applicant referred to are the current plans. It sounds like the geothermal has been removed, that's not, we don't need to move it. It's removed. Same thing with the landscaping plan. I thought the planning department has had good comments throughout in terms of landscaping. A lot of what's been improved. It sounds like maybe a plan. You're saying you've addressed this in the most recent plan, and I can't really speak to that because the planning department are the experts, but I think if that's true, we don't have any issues there. If it's not, I think it's easy to fix because so many other places have the landscaping we're looking for, so I don't think that's going to be an issue. I really think the remaining issue here is the construction narrative. I don't know how detailed, it's hard to say how long something is going to take, I understand that. But I do think what I would want is some assurances that while I think parts are being worked on, the environment's protected, and you have the proper, straw bales or, sediment captures in place. And also that generally speaking, I think we'd like to see things proposed and built. I know that there's a lot of hurdles that come in the way, but with something that's this involved, we would want to make sure that you could contain the traffic. Everyone's been by a construction site where clearly they can't fit in the area that they're in. So that's mainly what I'd be looking for in that regard. Other people might have different opinions, but just to make sure the environment's protected and that the timing of how many things are happening at once and where vehicles are going to be, the overflow parking, I think is an issue there. In terms of demolishing it all at once, if that's what you want to do, I don't have any problem with that. I think that's your right. So, but again, I defer or be curious to hear what the rest of the board thinks. My recollection, this was a while ago, I guess in December, but my recollection is basically what Tiffany said, that we have had a lot of questions about the uses, and we obviously would have a concern about, these cottage uses, which would never be allowed today, overflowing into the residential property even more. The applicant said from the start that's not going to be the case and is willing to offer a covenant. So that works for me, as a condition of approval. I don't know if the planning department would recommend something different than that. I think that's actually stronger so long as that covenant says what we want to say, which is this is only for the residential use. I think it's a lot stronger than a narrative, frankly, because it would, be easily findable with the property forever. So, I think we need to clarify the planning department to make sure that the most recent plans the applicant says satisfy these questions is accurate and are accurate, and that we get a little more detail about the construction, and I think we're good to go.
Well, thank you. Does anybody else have anything they want to add on? Yeah, go ahead. A lot of the things that Ian mentioned. No, they all have to do, every single one of them has to do with the protecting the environment, the construction plan, some of the things that he didn't even mention about, which we mentioned at other meetings, where we had some of the cottages that were further north and we moved them further south to protect the wetlands there. The proper IA system, the flow, all that, it all has to do with protecting the environment. And there's one thing that we're not dealing with, and I tried to ask the applicant about it, but they're not ready to talk about it now. I think not doing anything about those structures along the shoreline and just leaving them to deteriorate and flow into Lake Montauk is a big deal to me. It's an environmentally impactful item, and I would not recommend approval unless that item is taken care of. So the other thing I wanted to mention, to just sort of refresh my memory, I know Randy brought this up. With regard to the cottages, they're not going to be, the flow rate, Brian, is that measured as though they were sort of resort motel units or as though they were year-round residences?
I could check that for you, but to the best of my knowledge, they are measured by their square footage size as resort units, not as single-family residences.
So if at one point in the future they decide to use them as single-family residences year-round, they would be over capacity in terms of the flow rate.
I would have to check those numbers. I think a few of them would have are at the 300 gallons per day that a 1 to 4 bedroom residence has, but I would have to check those numbers on the plan.
So is there any way that we can assure ourselves that that won't happen, that there'll be, is there a covenant or something that we could include as a condition of approval in order to make sure that those units are always used as they're proposed to be used now?
They'd have to change the use if they want, right?
Yes and no. Let me answer the question, because I think I understand the concern is that, a resort unit is lived in intermittently. It has a lower sanitary flow according to the health department. If these are lived in year round, then, you know, the health department has a higher flow for a single family residence that's lived in year round. There is nothing in the code that says that you can't take either a transient motel or resort unit, you know, those two different use definitions, and rent them out to somebody on a weekend or 10-year basis. You're allowed to do that. So there aren't things that you can't really prevent that under the code. What I am trying to get to here, though, is the health department design flow rates, which it's really, I think in this case, ends up being a little bit moot, but let me just grab them here just because I want to give you some numbers. So I'm not sure the exact size of each of the units. And, you know, actually, I guess to give you a practical example of that, to think of resort units, anything that is condoed out or is a co-op is technically a resort use under our code. So think of all the condo complexes you know of that, you know, the Montauk Tower is a condominium. You have people that live there year round. So it is something that happens, but I do understand the concern is that, you know, is the nature of the use going to increase the generated sanitary flow? So I will say, when you have once you have any, once you have a kitchenette in them, so this is, I'm going down a weird road here, but this is the difference between what the health department standards are and what our definitions are. But once you're over a certain square footage, and once you have any kind of cooking facilities, the health department essentially treats you as a single family residence anyway. So in this case, you know, I'm not sure, you know, Brian's been reviewing the application. I'm not sure if each of these has cooking facilities. I think they do, right? I think they all do, right? Is that correct? Okay. So this is a long way to a short answer, but under health department regulations, all those units, because they have cooking facilities, it's irrelevant whether or not they are a motel resort use or they're a single family residence. It's the same generated sanitary flow. It's based on cooking facilities and square footage. So I took the long way there, but I got there.
No, you made it clear.
And Brian, you made a comment that they are not obligated to do anything about the whole thing.
No, but it is the planning department's opinion that well, it's a fact that they're in coastal erosion overlay zone 2. Coastal erosion overlay zone 2 prohibits the reconstruction of erosion control structures. It is the planning department's opinion that the reconstruction of that bulkhead would need a variance. So it was a little oversimplified to say the answer was no. They're free to get a determination from the building department to support that or issue something different. But it is the department's position that reconstructing that bulkhead would need a variance. If you've been to the property, if I go back to the area, you'll see they're not protecting anything behind them. They would be, I don't mind sharing with you, they would be a poor candidate. There doesn't seem to be a strong basis for granting a variance there. And, further, everybody recognizes that this is an environmentally sensitive area. The applicant has recognized that throughout this application here. And there is some debris on the shoreline here. Lake Montauk could use all the love it could get, and removing something that is both an environmental and a safety hazard is only a benefit to everybody. I understand that they may want to consider how they want to approach that, but I want to be crystal clear about how the planning department perceives those structures, their reconstruction, and their removal.
Okay. Clear, you've been clear about that. Let's see, Ed, do you have anything you want to add on this? Reaching out.
Nothing that hasn't already been said.
Thank you, Ed. Anybody else?
Just have one question about the material of wood. Is it like pressure treated? Is it old railroad ties? I mean, it's an environmental threat?
It's old, so whatever was leaching out of it, it's probably not leaching anymore. From what I remember, they were 6x6 railroad ties. They didn't seem to be creosote coated. I can't tell you definitively what they're composed of, but they have been there since. I think I'd have to double check, but I think the late 60s. So whatever was going to leach out of them, most of it is probably leached out.
Are we allowed to make that a condition of approval that they remove all that material?
No.
No, I mean, if this whole project increased the deterioration, if there was some connection, as it is now, it's almost like a totally separate issue. From my understanding of the past history of this, basically you can't make them, take it out.
And we can't condition the approval on that.
There's not really much of a nexus.
That would be how we would
Same
make
thing.
them do it. That's the weapon.
Let's try it.
You can hit him with a club, or you can hit him with a cane.
But I'm not allowing
Did you have anything, Sharon, one thing?
No, I think everything's sorry.
I'm gonna go through the questions because I do think, we should give some clarity and really, in my opinion, emphasis. The first question is, does the board want to obtain a more detailed, comprehensive narrative from the applicant detailing all proposed uses on the property and a construction protocol that identifies at minimum the applicant's timing for reconstruction of the cottages, construction of the new primary residence, installation of sanitary system number 1, partial or completed revegetation, and an estimated time span to complete the redevelopment of the property. And at the risk of continuing to speak, I think this is really important. You're dealing with a pre-existing non-conforming use in a residential area, and I think that it would be, part of being a good neighbor to getting this information more specific, and so the folks who live nearby will know just what they're dealing with and for how long they're going to be dealing with it. So does anybody want to add or agree or disagree? I don't want to.
I agree.
What information would we want to see though? Because I think
What's discussed here, construction protocol that identifies the timing.
If I may interrupt.
Please.
Brenda Mistrian for Montauk Cottages, sorry, a voice issue. Did you review the construction protocol that we submitted and you're finding it deficient, or was it possible that you missed it?
What I'd like is the planning department's issues with it to be addressed. That's my concern. The planning department has issues with how it was presented, and and as far as I'm concerned, look, I'm not a construction guy, and I'm not going to tell you that I like or don't. I'm relying in this case on the planning department. So,
Well, I think what I heard the board's concerns are, which relating to that, is isolating the site and making sure that environmentally it's contained, which the NRSP, which we're going to the zoning board next. And I was actually just going to say, maybe it's a good idea for us to do that and deal with some of the environmental containment issues and come back before we come back here with a covenant and all these, because I feel like we're getting to the point where it's little tiny pieces, and maybe we should go to the zoning board, if that's okay with Brian. I believe you were going to schedule us.
Yeah, I don't necessarily have a problem with that. I will point out though that there is a relatively small amount of this project is in natural resources jurisdiction, not, a lot of the cottages, the residence swimming pool, if I'm not mistaken, are all out of natural resources special permit jurisdiction. It might only be just the construction of the cottages that are closest to that northern property line and to the bluff line that require an NRSP. But maybe half the project, maybe less than half of it.
well, to focus on the issue that Ms. Mistrian just raised, the construction protocols, does the planning department have specific issues with the construction protocols?
I don't know if issues is the right word. I don't know if that's fair to the application, but I do think with a property that has this many structures on it and multiple protected natural features, something that said this is the order that the cottages are going to be built in. I personally would like to see that northern buffer, which is the best part of the revegetation plan, or it had been. I'm sorry that there was a more recent version that I wasn't aware of. I apologize to the board and the applicant for that. But that northern buffer was really laid out well, good species density, good composition, and that really provides some important protection of that stream to the north. The sooner that can be installed, the better. Obviously, they're going to demo the cottages and rebuild what's closest to that northern property line first. That would make sense. But the sooner that those plants are in the ground, the better it is for the wetlands and the better, since they flow into Lake Montauk, the better it is for Lake Montauk. If there's a little bit more of an articulation of when the sanitary system is going to be installed, which is going to serve multiple structures on here, and how that relates to the sequencing of the buildings around it, I think that just provides greater clarity to an involved project.
So the construction protocol does note that it starts in the northwest and maybe move into the southeast, but there is some efficiency just from a construction perspective. That's my background of getting everything done at once. To frame 12 houses at once versus framing 3 is framing 3 more, and it also that extends the longer you're under construction, the more money you spend. So the idea is to do this project in bulk, in full, and the property is not going to be occupied, so there's not going to be a point where a septic system is being used. It's going to all be offline and all be online together. And that's the most efficient way to tackle a project of this size. But most of that's covered in the construction protocol. I will meet with Brian maybe before the zoning board, and I'll make sure that we have something in the file for any questions that are outside of that. I get and maybe phasing would be, it's not this client's desire to phase it.
I'm not going to tell you, I don't think it's our desire to tell you how to do it, just because I speak for myself. I think that it would benefit from some specificity, some certainty. And really, I'm talking about for the neighbors more than anything else.
So the construction protocol is pretty bulleted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the order of sequence. So I'll go over it with Brian and see if there's any deficiencies and revise it if so.
Does anybody else have anything on that?
Thank you.
Thank you. Number 2, does the board want to obtain greater detail regarding any site regrading on the survey and have the composition, including cross sections of the driveway and parking areas, revised to comply with regulations of harbor protection overlay district? Any disagreement with that?
Yeah, Britton, do you want to address that related part?
The second question. You want me to run it again?
Yes, I wasn't thinking of it.
Does the board want to obtain greater detail regarding any site regrading on the survey and have the composition, including cross sections of the driveway and parking areas revised?
So I was confused by that, and I talked to Brian right when I got here. So because they noted bluestone in one of the details, because we have to change that to marl and pea gravel, the thicknesses will change. So it's just changing the material and changing the thickness of that material on a profile that was already in the documents. No problem. That's an easy fix.
Good. Does the planning board want to require a revised landscaping plan that will clearly label the square footages of proposed clearing and revegetation and increases the quantity of woody vegetation in the revegetation islands, quote, around the cottages to be more consistent with the revegetation definition on the town code and the standards for revegetation within the natural resources special permit jurisdiction?
So I would just defer to ask Brian to review the newer plan. Yeah, it should be satisfied.
Does the board want to require relocation of the geothermal heating? That's a done issue. And does the board want to evaluate a covenant that would ensure the new primary residence does not become part of the commercial operation of property? And again, that's
which we already said we would do last meeting.
So that's the specifics of the language is down the road question.
Just in case there's something else that we want to put into that as well that comes up in the environmental review or what have you.
But just to be clear, before final approval here, we know the wording of that covenant. So, okay, great.
I don't see anything about the bulkhead, but you know how we feel.
I believe there might be a memo in the file that the previous planning board attorney wrote on that. Maybe we'll revisit that.
Thank you very much. See you next time. On to our next matter, which is 92 Springs Close Highway. Will, you're going to be, Brian, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you, board members.
Will, you've got this one. Mr. Halsey, are you on this one or are you on the next one?
I'm on this one and
Oh, double that. Okay. And Mr. Hanson is also a double header. I'll let you know.
yeah, that's no problem.
It's the last edition of June 2021. So, I don't know what they think. I wouldn't think. Okay.
So this was the application to construct a new 600 square foot barn on the eastern end of the property, already occupied by various barns, nurseries, animal stalls, and feed and storage sheds. The property is located in Spring Coast Highway in Amagansett. This application was reviewed by the planning board at its March 9th, 2022 meeting, where it was determined that no lighting was proposed on the barn, that the applicant should clarify whether the nursery in the center of the property was part of the application or previous approval, and whether the board should determine whether additional screening was necessary for the residential areas surrounding the lot. The applicant has clarified in their latest submission that they wish for the nursery at the center of the property, which is here, to be considered as part of the current site plan application. Per the 4/10 rule regarding setbacks, that means that the requirement for side yard setbacks is 8 feet, given that the setback is 20.2 feet on the south side yard and 9.7 feet on the north side yard. This will not be an issue, and the nursery can be approved along with the proposed barn. The applicant has submitted revised elevations that show the location of the proposed lights on the barn, as well with cut sheets that outline the fixtures and lumen levels. The fixtures are fully cut off, and the lumen levels are well within guidelines. At the previous evaluation, the planning board determined that they would wait to hear comments from the public regarding potential additional screening for the residential areas surrounding the lot. So in conclusion, the application has complied with all requirements requested after the previous planning board review. The nursery has been incorporated as a part of the application, and the applicant has submitted revised elevations and cut sheets that provide an overview of lighting in the proposed barn. The planning board will wait to hear comments from the public regarding potential additional screening, but otherwise the application is complete and ready to be scheduled for public hearing.
Thanks very much. Mr. Holden?
Good evening, Joel Halsey, here for representing Lighthouse Land Planning, and Spring Coast Highway. I have nothing really to add. If the board has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I did mention that there was no lighting as part of this application in the previous meeting. I spoke to the property owner, and when I brought up the word of lighting, he said, "Oh, he might be interested in having some lights on this barn." So,
Michael,
I have nothing to add as well. I am curious to hear what the public will say. Issues have been addressed. Well, good.
Anyone have anything they want to add? Ed?
Nope, I'm good.
All right. Will the planning board wait to hear comments from the public? I guess the answer is you bet. And is the application complete and ready to be scheduled for a public hearing? So you all in agreement on that? Ed, I see you nodding your head. Do I see you nodding your head? All right. See you next time.
Yep, I'm thinking
We'll do that 2 seconds. Oh, next time on this side. And last is Ross School Pedal Course. And Marco, this is yours?
What's that? I did. Somewhere in our areas. Okay. You might know.
This is only one spot.
Yeah, there's one.
Excuse me, planning board.
Yes.
This is LTV. We do have one caller holding that just got on.
Regarding an application? We don't know yet.
We don't know. I just put up the lower third and nope, cancel that. They just hung up.
Thank you. We will resume.
I think we might try.
Did you have fun?
Okay, so this was an application, minor site plan application to construct 3 padel courts in the Rock School over top of an existing basketball court. Previously, the board has decided, in the previous review, the board decided to waive the public hearing requirement and determined that additional parking was not needed. So the applicant needed to submit a copy of the existing survey, which delineated where the existing limits of the basketball court is, and they've done that. So the board should discuss if they find that it's complete, ready for approval.
All that correct. Mr. Halsey, anything?
Joe Halsey, Lighthouse Land Planning. I'm representing Tara Burke on behalf of this application. She cannot be here tonight. We have nothing to add. So if the board has any questions, I'll try to answer as best I can, or she'll text me really quick.
Michael?
I don't think there's any additional information to.
Does anyone have anything else on this? No. Ed?
What is a padel court?
I was just Googling that.
There you go. That's the.
You mean you weren't watching this thing?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you did cross between squash and pickleball, I guess.
There it is.
It's
I somehow knew pickleball factored into this.
then it's a new hybrid.
No, it's not pickleball.
It's not
No, it's not pickleball.
Yeah, but it's a combination of that and squash, right? Is that what you said, Joel?
I'm guessing.
They play
Oh,
I'm making this up.
The ball, yeah, Andy Ham's the expert. But the ball careens off the wall. So it's.
So it's like handball or like a racquetball.
Okay.
It's outdoor version of squash. Yeah.
Oh, all right. Probably not going to check it out.
Think of it as Hampton's highlight.
Next Olympic sport.
Yeah.
Well, but it's got to follow, so that seems to be good enough. All right, this application complete, ready for approval?
I think so.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Now, see you next time.
Okay.
All right, that ends our work session. We will go into our regular meeting. We have 2 boards of review, and then we have some resolutions that need to be read in. First, board of review is the request of Henry J. Benzoni for a building permit on the premises at 15 Abrams Ave. Portions of lots 21 to 24, lot 25, portions of lots 26 and 32, and the Pavilion Place right-of-way. Block 1, map number 171, and then new parcel 55 in Suffolk County Tax Map 300-120-3-15 and 17.2. I've read the request. The amount of the undertaking is $22,000. There's a fair amount of work that will need to be done. I find it satisfactory and move for its approval. Your second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Right.
Thank you. Any opposed? Pass, 6-0. Second board review is we need to make sure that the name is correct. I have it as Petcanis and Petkana. I am guessing Petcanis is probably the correct spelling. But with that correction in mind, we have the request of, again, I apologize if we got your name wrong on one or the other, George Petcanis for a building permit on the premises at 31st Street in Springs, lots 8, lots 42 through 50, and a portion of 2nd Street, lot number 3, map 499, Ribbon and Rule, parcel 9B, Suffolk County Tax Map 300-75-2-12.8. The amount of the undertaking is $16,500. And again, I reviewed the work to be performed, and it seems appropriate. And I move for its approval. Is there a second? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. All those opposed? None? Passed 6-0.
I think you're right on the pronunciation of the last one.
Petcanis? Yeah, I believe you.
Email address as the text.
Yeah, that's why I'm based on experience. There you go. All right, next is lot 72 LLC. Ian, this is yours.
The matter of lot 72 LLC for a waiver of subdivision approval. I read the resolution move for adoption.
Is there a second? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Any opposed? Passed 6-0. And now drum roll, please. Ed, on Panago Maple.
Oh, wow. Okay. In the matter of the application of Panago Maple, lot line modification, Suffolk County Tax Map 300-188-1, 16.2, 17.1, and 21. I've read the finding and determination of the board and call for the approval of a lot line modification.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passed 6-0. And back to Ian for the Montauk Beach House approval of the site plan.
In the matter of Montauk Beach House 2 site plan, for site plan approval, I have read the resolution and move for its adoption.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passed 6-0. And finally, because we can't get enough Ed. Ed?
Yeah, you're making me nervous. Yes, so in the matter of the application of South Essex Corner Site Plan Special Permit, Suffolk County Tax Map 300-49-1-13.1, schedule public hearing. A public hearing is hereby scheduled to be held at Town Hall, 159 Panago Road, East Hampton, on Wednesday, June 8th, 2022 at 7 p.m. or soon thereafter, as this matter may be heard, to consider the said application. Surveys, elevations, plans, site plans, and the like are available for inspection at the planning board offices at 300 Panago Place in East Hampton. The applicant is hereby notified of the requirement that adjacent property owners is listed on the assessment rolls, including those immediately across any public or private streets, be notified and the subject property be posted as required by section 255-9-23 of the town code.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, so I've read the notice of scheduling of a public hearing and call for its adoption.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passed 6-0. All right, and with that, thank you, Ed. Does any board members have anything else they want to raise? Any other issues, new business, old issues? In that case, we'll motion to adjourn the clock. Is there a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned until we are adjourned